We are live. Can somebody shoot me a message and let me know if you can hear me? I'm wearing my headphones today, so I don't have to shout at the camera. Okay, good. Thanks, Jason. Okay, gang, welcome to our Sunday sit. I just had a mini crisis. That's why I'm a minute late. So, mind scattered. I'm really happy to sit with you guys. Um, So, for those of you who have done this sit before, you can just settle into your posture and start doing Zazen. Excuse me. Timepiece. And for those of you who are new, I'm just going to give some very brief Zazen instructions. So, we'll do a standard 22-minute sit, give or take, between 20 and 25 minutes. So we'll do one sit, and that will be followed by a 5-minute, what we call a rest kinhin or rest meditation. And that's time to stretch if you need to, go to the bathroom. And then we will do another 25 minute sit. And at the end of that, I'll just open up the space. I'll just kind of sit quietly, and we can sit a little bit more while you think of questions. And if you have some questions, you can just text them to me. Questions about meditation practice, you can text them here on YouTube. Okay, so um, let us begin. You can turn away. You don't have to. I wouldn't recommend facing the computer. I'm going to turn my body to the side. Actually, I'll turn and I'll look that way. So you don't want to be looking at your computer when you're sitting. So, in fact, I'm going to do that now while I give the Zazen instruction. So, I'm going to assume you're sitting cross-legged. If you're sitting on a chair, which is perfectly fine, or if you're sitting seiza, which is kneeling, that's great too. You can follow these instructions as they pertain to however you're sitting. If you're sitting cross-legged, have your seat elevated high enough to where your knees are touching the ground. So you don't want your knees off the ground. That puts pressure on your sciatica. So sometimes in the monastery, we had these smaller flat cushions, and people would sometimes have to put 2 or 3 of those underneath one or another knee so that they could have their knees on a solid foundation. So you don't want your knees dangling. So whatever you have to do to make sure your knees are touching the ground, please do so. Usually it just means elevating your seat with 1 or 2 more cushions or something. And so we're sitting up straight, straight but not rigid. Take a few breaths just to relax and sink into our posture. A few deep inhale, exhale. You rock a little bit side to side to get your balance. A little bit forward and a little bit back. And you can put your hands flat on your thighs. You can hold whatever mudra you want, of course. One that we do at the Zen monastery is we would take right hand around the left thumb and very gently just put this at our waist or in our lap. We would also have right hand on the bottom, and we would line up the knuckles. As you can see, these middle knuckles here are lined up with our thumbs lightly touching. Then we would put that also at our hara or our diaphragm. So put your hands however you want. Those are a few options there. You can sit Burmese, which is just a simple cross of the legs. A half lotus is one foot up on the other opposite thigh, and then full lotus is both feet up on the opposite thighs. So once you take your posture, you have your mudra, your eyes are in Zazen, um, about 2 or 3 feet ahead of you. You're holding a soft gaze. So that means you activate your sort of, not activate, but the peripheral vision is activated. So as opposed to focusing on what's right in front of you, um, the vision is dispersed. This can be a little bit off-putting for people sometimes. They're like, okay, I was like staring at the ground, and then I went da 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 da. That is a phase. We keep the eyes open in Zen meditation, because I was told, because your it's easy to go into your own dreamscape when you close your eyes. So you're including your surroundings in the sit with you, as opposed to potentially getting stuck in your head, which potentially can happen when you close your eyes. But there are traditions where eyes are closed, and you will often see monks with their eyes closed, and usually they're nodding because they're falling asleep. But generally speaking, we keep our eyes open with a soft gaze about 2 or 3 feet ahead of us. And just try and maintain a straight position, but not stiff. You definitely don't want to be stiff. So if you can drop your shoulders, relax the muscles in your face, relax your eyebrows, relax here. Here is where I carry a lot of tension. This must go back to when we were animals that had to crush things with our teeth. This is my jaw muscles, and I carry tension in there sometimes. So be aware of that. The tension you're carrying, I carry it in here as well, in the trapezoid muscles. So drop your shoulders, let them relax. And then when you breathe in, you're breathing through your diaphragm, which is lower belly breathing. And once again, sometimes one can get sort of obsessive about, okay, am I breathing into my belly? It got painful when I was breathing into my belly. Do I breathe really deeply and force it in my belly because that feels weird? You want to do a natural breathing, a deep but a natural breathing. um, Anytime I've found for myself, when I get in the zone of thinking about what's going on in my body, that usually means it's happening up here. So it's time for me to just watch that thought come and watch it go, instead of worrying about breathing or sitting up straight or whatever it is I'm worrying about body wise. But generally speaking, you're breathing from your diaphragm or your hara, which is like an inch below your belly button and an inch back. But through your nostrils, kind of a deep, relaxed breathing. Inhale through the nostril and then exhale through the nostril. Tongue lightly touching the roof of the mouth. So once you've taken your posture, there's only one thing to do, which is just sit. And when we sit, of course, the mind um, works. It doesn't put a sign on the door that says out to lunch because this guy's meditating. It says, opens its door and it says we're open for business, and lets every thought in. So the practice is to just put your attention to your breath. It's very simple, gentle, straightforward um, practice to put the attention to the breath. Um, and I variously heard it described as, really throwing yourself and dying into the breath, and just gently holding your attention to the breath. Sometimes it manifests in different ways, but gently holding attention to the breath is good. And then, of course, the mind will wander, and you'll start thinking something. Inevitably, thoughts will arise, and the practice is you notice them. You're awake, and you notice that you thought, and then you just bring the attention back to the breath. And it's hard to do because the mind wants to stay with the problem that you you've thought of, or the fantasy, or the idea, or the question, whatever the mind has given you, it would like your attention. And the practice is to put your attention back on your breath. So you don't believe the story your mind is telling you and identify with it and buy into it and let it sail you on its journey. You just do your best to bring the attention back to the breath. And that's really the practice. The mind is going to wander and you bring it back to the breath. Um, Basic. Okay. I think that makes sense. So we're going to start our sit now. And we'll sit for 20, 25 minutes, somewhere in there. And then we'll take a 5-minute break. So we'll start the sit now, and I'll let you know when it ends. Okay, so that finishes our first sit. We're going to take just a little 4 or 5 minute break now, so you can do what you got to do. Go to the bathroom or stretch or get a drink of water, and we'll meet back here again in 4 or 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back. We'll start our second 22-minute sit, followed by our Q&A. So you can settle back into your seated position. Take a few deep breaths to get settled back in. And let the sit do itself. You just put your attention on your breath and just trust that you're sitting. That's all you got to do. So we'll let the sit begin now. Okay. Well played, spiritual warriors. You can take a little stretch now. If anybody has any questions or also comments, if you just want to shoot something into the chat, we can all sit with a little bit. That would be great. So I was sitting here. It's very, very hot here. We are in the middle of a interestingly, dangerously hot summer here in Vienna. It's the hottest summer I've had in Vienna since I've been here. We have these old buildings with these very, very sort of old walls. And when it starts to get hot outside, the walls keep the heat out. But past a certain point, the walls heat up. They're made out of brick, I think. And past a certain point in the summer, the walls start to heat up, and then it's just like an oven inside. Um, so I was getting a little bit sleepy when I was doing this sit, and I was remembering a nun uh, that we that I sat with for many years at the monastery, and she had an almost pathological condition where she would the second she sat, it was probably about at one time I counted. This is the kind of monk I was. I was so mad I counted. It was probably about 9 seconds before she had passed out. She would be doing this, and she would literally almost have her head fall like to the point where her head was in between her legs, and she'd just be passed out. And not 50% of the time she sat, 75, 100% of the time. So falling asleep, and I think that was sort of something was up there. I think she was rebelling in some sort of unconscious way against having to sit because I don't know what was going on there. But everybody goes through a sitting phase, and there's like different things you can do. Or for, everybody goes through a sleeping phase on the cushion. Like you sit, you're all ready, you got your energy, and it's like gourmet sleep. You even drool a little bit, like you're so tired. And there's two schools of thought on that: don't sleep, try and stay awake. And and the other school of thought is, if that's what you need, sleep. Um, we would carry the keisaku in the zendo, which is a wooden stick, and people could ask for the keisaku by putting their hands at gasho, and then you would smack them on the shoulders 3 times, and that would give people energy. It was an interesting practice because the energy that went into the smacking from the stick went into people's bodies, and they were usually energized. But truth be told, 5 minutes later, if they were exhausted, they were going to be sleeping. Um, so it usually it happens at retreats a lot. Sometimes people will go through a sleeping phase on the cushion. If you're in a sleeping phase in on the cushion, or if you get in a sleeping phase later on, I wouldn't worry too much about it. One thing I'm learning is that y- there's been many different types of attitudes that I bring to practice, and um, I'm not sure what that is. I think it's just maybe my personality. I always have a new attitude. My attitude lately is one of trust. Um, I sit down, I do the practice, and there's a bigger process taking place that I can just surrender to. So I have, in other periods in my practice, I'll bring a very focused and direct attitude and energy, and I will die into the cushion, as my teacher used to say. I'm starting to learn the difference between attitude about practice and insights that arise from practice and teachings about the practice and the practice. Like I'll knock myself out with attitudes and teachings and insights about Zen practice, but the practice is like so very, very simple. You know, we take our posture, and that's really it. We take our posture and then put the attention to the breath. Um, and it's not thinking about the breath, it's focusing on it or gently holding the attention to the breath. Um, the practice is I'm sure you noticed this maybe in your second sit. It's good to do a few sits because the first one is always just cleaning out the trash. But then the second one usually is a little bit deeper. And I'm sure you noticed that there are moments when you're not thinking anything. Your attention is so complete that there's no self there, and that's um, Zazen. Uh, and that happens of its own on its own. Um, but the practice is so simple, just holding the attention to the breath and taking a good posture as best you can, a straight, clear, direct posture with some physical integrity. Holding that posture for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you've committed to, in a space where you're not going to be interrupted, and then yeah, just holding your attention to the breath. So it's very very simple. So I find the more I do this practice, the less I know about it. I'm finding and the simpler it is, and the consistency of that simplicity is what I'm finding to be really important, because it's like a north star. There's so many things that can distract me. There's so many teachings. There's so much to do. There's so much to think about. There's so much exciting stuff out there. It's easy to get distracted, and to forget. So simple practice, holding the attention to the breath. Okay, looks like somebody. Nina says there was a woman at Tassajara who had gourmet sleep. Sounds like a koan, something at the beginning of a koan. Yeah, gourmet sleep on the cushion. Um, let's see. I think that's all I wanted to say about sitting practice. Um, I did a video not too long ago, called, I think it was, what was it called? It was the first 30 seconds of the sit. That's what it was, and I was talking about these different approaches to like getting yourself to a point where I can do the practice. But like I said just a minute ago, like having for me, something that's been really useful lately is having clarity on exactly what the practice is. And once I take the seat, um, everything else goes. Like, uh, I mean, if I'm going to work on a koan or contemplate something that I'm working on for writing, that's a different kind of thing. And I'll do that sometimes in a sitting meditation format. But the foundation is always Zazen. Um, and the basic practice for me is always Zazen. And like I said, that practice is just holding the attention to the breath. And something happens. I was listening to a talk by Nisargadatta Maharaj, who's a Vedantic teacher, from the last century, and he was some student was complaining about not really knowing if he was doing his spiritual practice right, and Nisargadatta was like, just just do it. Something's happening on a deeper psyche. Your deeper psyche, I think, is the term that he used. Jung would say, Freud would say, the subconscious, um, big mind, or true self, or the grace of God, whatever you want to call it. But something. When I talk about trust and surrender, there's something I think happening, um, when you just bring yourself to the cushion and bring yourself to the practice and do that simple, uh, basic practice of holding the attention to the breath. Like, you trust it, and the mind. I was thinking during the sit today, my mind started working on some problem, and I sort of noticed it, or was aware of it, and I thought that little it's like a little dog, like it's scurrying around, like looking for the rodent, like it's trying to protect you. It's like sniffing and looking for the danger. God bless that little mind. It's but the problem is, as they say, it's a good servant, but not a great master. So if you let it drag you all over the place, then you're going to suffer. So, okay, Ryan. Ryan says, thank you for the clear and concise Zazen practice instruction. Correct posture with the eyes open is hugely important. Thanks for getting me back on track. Yeah, I find the eyes open is really important too. When I shut my eyes, I go into la la land. And I had a phase when I first started practicing where uh, I couldn't help but not, I couldn't help but focus in on the fine grain of the wooden tiles in front of me, and then the grains within the grains, and then the grains within the grains within the grains. And it was like this corkscrewing, infinite regressive spiral. Um, you know, And that's another thing that's just like a phase in practice, or all these obstacles that get thrown up. But yeah, just holding your eyes open, a few feet in front of you, with a soft gaze. And again, the soft gaze is like the peripheral vision. So it's like I can see my two hands right now, and I'm not focusing on the fine grain of the wood. Um, and I also have heard teachers say, take this, however you will. If you're feeling sort of sleepy, I've heard teachers say, just lift, instead of 2 feet in front of you, lift your head a little bit to maybe 4 feet in front of you. So you're taking in more, you're more upright, and you're more awake. And if you're really energized, bring it down maybe to have your eyes closer in front of you, maybe 2.5 feet or something. So you're narrowing your gaze if you're really agitated, excited, anxious, um, lifting your gaze if you're falling asleep. Thank you, Jason, for sitting with us today. Jason Poole says thank you. Oh, good. Angel. Hi, Angel. I'm glad you came. Jesse Neal, thank you for coming. Talking, talking about doing the practice right reminds me of something my teacher said to me once. He said, if it ever becomes a process, stop. Oh, that's interesting. If it ever becomes a process, stop. I have to think about that one. Not think about it. A shtick. Yeah, a shtick, a process, a thing, a goal, an aim. Yeah. I mean, again, I feel like sometimes that any attitude brought to the cushion, I think, is okay. Anything that gets you to the cushion, it's it can be hard to come every day or 3 times a week or something to the cushion, um, and so and you have different. I have different insights about it, different phases of my life that I'm in. So sometimes I will think of it more as a process, but in the end, it doesn't matter. Like the practice, I try and just have it be the same every time, no matter what. Just the attention to the breath, surrender to that attention to the breath, the in and the out. That's it. Ryan asks, is it important to always have the head erect on the spine? The head erect on the spine, I'm not sure what that means exactly. I mean, is it important that my arms often fall asleep? Ooh, that does not sound like fun at all. My arms often fall asleep, and I have to drop my head forward for a minute to get the circulation going again. Okay, I'm not sure. Your arms shouldn't be falling asleep, so I'm not sure what's up with that. But if you can position your hands to in some way that your arms are not falling asleep, that's what you want. Legs will fall asleep, of course, because they're crossed. And by the way, never walk on a foot that's fallen asleep because you break it. You'll sprain it and you'll fall ass over tea kettle. Um, but your arms shouldn't be falling asleep. So you asked me, is it important to have the head erect on the spine? I'm not sure exactly what that means. I mean, the head. So if your eyes are 3 feet in front of you with a soft gaze, the posture that I was taught was so ideally your nose is parallel with your diaphragm or like your belly button, right below your belly button. So it's kind of like this. But if you need to, you do not want to sit if your arms have fallen asleep. If your legs have fallen asleep, but I always sit through that. But generally speaking, you want to sit through um, whatever time commitment you've made without moving. The nothing kills a sit, like when you give up on it for some reason. And I'm guilty of this, and it's sometimes you have to, but it's really good to sit through your time commitment, without moving or stopping. But you don't want to have your arms fall asleep. So I'm not sure what kind of mudra you're doing, but maybe if you just lay your hands flat on your thighs and make sure that you're relaxed up here. I mean, I drop my shoulders all the time. I drop them like that. Um, yeah, because it's easy to if I'm holding this mudra. Sometimes it's easy to hunch like that, and you don't want to be hunched like that. You want that to be relaxed and it upright, straight but not rigid. pivoting your hips. When you pivot your hips forward, you get this natural curvature in the spine, the coccyx, the lower back, and your knees will touch the floor, and it's a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more balanced, as opposed to being hunched in any sort of way or rigid. You pivot your hips forward on your cushion, and then you have that curve in your spine. And so hopefully if you do that, you can your arms won't fall asleep. Just lay your hands flat on your thighs, something like that. Hope that helps. Brian, shoot me a email through Patreon, a message through Patreon too. We can talk about this more because it seems like that's something that can be solved. Okay, this is a good start for my practice for this week. Anybody have any last questions? It was really nice to see everybody. Jason and Ryan and Nina, Jesse. Okay. Yeah, that might have it might have something to do with it. And yeah, we can talk about that. I'm gonna think about this. I'm gonna ask my friend Keegan, who's been sitting for a long time, and ask him if he's ever heard of that. If there's anything he recommends for like arms falling asleep in meditation. Yeah. Okay, my friends. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining. We'll see you next time. Probably a month or so, maybe a little bit less. Ciao.